In this week's tip, I show you how to avoid a glitch in ZBrush that can really cause problems when you're scaling models that have subdivision levels. Let's see what happens. Now this issue happens when a model has detail in a high subdivision level, and you either enlarge or shrink the model when it's on a low subdivision level. Now let me show you what I mean. We've got this head model here, and let me just zoom in. You can see we've got some nice fine detail in a high subdivision level. Let's go down to the lowest subdivision level. I'm just hitting Shift D a few times. Okay, and let's shrink this head down. So I'm going to go into Geometry and open up the Size subpalette, and let's just drag this way down. Okay, let's zoom in and hit D to go up our subdivision levels. Now this is pretty crazy. The reason why this is happening is because ZBrush remembers that detail as having a certain size. And when we shrunk the model, the detail stayed the same size, but the overall model got smaller. So this is probably not the effect you're looking for when you're scaling a model. So I'm going to hit Control Z a few times to undo this back to before we scaled it. All right, we'll zoom out here. So what you want to do when you're scaling models with subdivision levels and lots of detail is you want to scale it when it's on the highest subdivision level. So I just hit D a few times. Now when we scale this down, we can get as small as we want, and that detail gets shrunk at the same proportion as the overall model. Okay, so I'm going to hit Control Z to undo that scaling, hit F to focus and zoom out again. Now that's good and all, but what if you've got multiple subtools that need to scale together? So I'm going to open up my subtool palette and let's turn on the eyeballs. Now, ZBrush has a built-in tool that's meant to transform objects together, and you can even sculpt them together, move them around, scale them, whatever. It's called Transpose Master. But even this has problems. Let me show you what I mean. So this works on any visible subtools. So we've got the head and the eyes visible. Let's go to Z Plugin, make sure we've got Transpose Master, and let's click T-Pose Mesh. So what this is going to do is it combines all those visible subtools into one tool, one subtool, and it also puts everything on the lowest subdivision level. So you might think we're in for the same problems as we were before. Let's go to Geometry, and we'll shrink everything down together. And then the way we get back is we go to Z Plugin and T-Pose to Sub-T. So what this does is it applies those scale changes to all of the individual subtools and brings it back the way it was before, where they're split into two separate subtools. So I'm going to hit F to focus in on this. So you can see this is kind of interesting. It's kind of a halfway effect. It's not as bad as the other scaling effect, but it's still got some problems. So let's undo this. I'm going to hit Control Z and just hit that about 2 or 3 times so we can undo the scaling that was on the head. And now we actually have to undo the scaling on the eyeballs too. So I'm going to hit Control Z a few times, get the eyeballs back to this original scale they were before. All right, so I'm just going to select the head subtool and hit D a few times to go back up to the highest subdivision level. And the eyeballs don't actually have subdivision levels, so we can just leave those the way they are. So what we need is a solution that can scale different subtools by the same amount, but without having to go down to the lowest subdivision level, without having to use Transpose Master. So the solution for this is actually in the Deformation palette. And what we want to do here is use the size. So with this, we can drag down the scale, and we're on our highest subdivision level. We know that the detail is getting scaled at the same proportion as the rest of the model. Now, unfortunately, we can only scale down by half in one movement, or you could also scale up if you wanted to scale, but we're just scaling small, so it's easier to see the difference. Now, what you do is you go down here to Repeat to Other. So what that does is it applies the same deformation, and it can work on any of these, not just scale, but for our purposes, we're just using the size. What it does is it repeats that same resize to any other visible subtools. So if you want to go smaller than that, you could just keep doing that. Repeat to Other, size again, repeat to Other, so on and so forth. So now we zoom in, and you can see the detail is the same proportion to the original model as it was before. and we've got all our different subtools scaled the same amount. But the takeaway message from this is that if you're scaling objects by a significant amount, you want to make sure you're on the highest subdivision level when you do it.